Hello, I am Glenn W. Hunter, and with me today, once again, is Tamika J Carter, the Advantage Counselor. And what we're going to be talking about today, saying social emotional learning, different cultures. Tamika, how's it going with you today, and how do you feel about your culture?
It is good. I am feeling great. Happy Black History Month. I am feeling proud of my culture and ready to share that love with others who want to share the same love of Black culture.
Outstanding, outstanding. So today, really what we want to focus on is, in fact, Black culture. It's Black History Month. We've had this for a while, so it didn't sneak up on anyone. For some of us that are a little less open-minded, ironically, it's the shortest month of the year, but all the same, it is something to be recognized, and it does tie into our topic of mental health. So, without further ado, what I'd like to open up with, Tamika, is Black history. What is the connection with the history and our mental health?
So there's a rich history of Black mental health. And I think as we're becoming more woke as a society and we're getting more dope therapists out there, we are seeing some of those things that occurred in history that we're now repairing and fixing. So as we go back to the American Psychological Association, there was actually an apology that they came out with where they discussed drapetomania, which was a diagnosis that they came up with for runaway slaves. So, meaning there's something wrong with you if you would attempt to leave slavery. It's also was came out that then you were able to pay for your hospital stay at an inpatient facility with a slave. So, our history of psychology and mental health has been a little complex. And so, as we begin to create new strategies, we have to take into account the certain things about our culture that affect our mental health in ways that is not necessarily taught in a lot of our scholarly circles or in our universities. It is very, very important to embrace your culture. That is a key aspect of mental health. We definitely are learning that more and more. And because a lot of African Americans have grown up in schools that tend to make white or Caucasian people the heroes, and a lot of times people of color are the villains, they end up internalizing this racism and having really low self esteem.
Wow. So we got a lot of things going on: indoctrination, self-esteem, all of that, and then we're going to squeeze it into a classroom. You know, I mean, from your perspective, when we start talking about multicultural um, ways that people are revealing themselves, how do non-African American children take this in? How do they actually process the fact that this is Black History Month, and two, there's trauma that comes with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're aware. I mean, I think it just depends on their proximity to Blackness. If that's, if they have friends, friends of the family, if they've experienced different types of Black people or different, social strata of African Americans. So that affects it. But what I've really learned with kiddos, they're so, kind of blank slate. So, kiddos don't really honestly start recognizing race till we point it out. A lot of times they're 6, 7, somewhere in there before they even notice differences. I remember with my oldest, I asked her, she'd draw pictures and she didn't differentiate between different races. But as they get older, they hear what a lot of what parents are passing on to their kids. And this is coming now into the schoolhouse and the classroom. And so they are having to deal with that. I was actually informed of one incident where I guess slavery was introduced, or the concept of slavery was introduced at a school. And the way that the non-Black students took it was to tell a young African American student that you're my slave and you need to bow down to me. So we have to be really careful in the ways that we bring that in, and making sure that our education is not culturally assaultive and that we do create a safe space for our kiddos, because what happens is, again, internalized racism, which leads to low self-esteem and leads to post-traumatic slave syndrome. It leads to all of these different issues that will show up and track with you throughout life. I have counseled numerous Black people who are in their 40s and 50s, and they're just like kind of waking up and recognizing too how a lot of their issues have stemmed from some of these kind of culturally assaultive practices that occurred in schools or in even their communities. So I hate when people have to pay for therapy for what someone else did to them. So I think if I can kind of spread the message to protect our youth and to protect ourselves by becoming more culturally aware, then we can really improve the mental health of African Americans.
Uh, okay, it seems that there's a number of steps that still need to be taken, even though, you literally gave a foundation of I guess, a syndrome that's over 130 years old now, 140 years old. So we still have work to do, evidently.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, what I'm seeing that I think that needs to be addressed is the resultant depression that comes. I mean, that seems to be almost a default, culturally speaking. Is that consistent with basically what the science says?
It is and it's not at times. So we deal with misdiagnosis a lot. Our field again is now waking up. The counseling field is 85%, I think was the last count, 85% white women, or white at least. And so we don't have evidence-based practices that are coming from the Black mental health community in order to guide treatment of African American clients. So, what we tend to have is kind of this misdiagnosis that is created based off of pathologizing culture. One example of that is African American women, Black women. We tend to present when we're anxious, it appears like anger. So when you get angry Black women, what's actually happening a lot of times is that when African American women get anxious, they're talking louder, they're talking faster, they're passionate about something, and that is coded as anger. So I'll see a lot of kids, young kids, getting diagnosed with conduct disorder. Not they like skip over oppositional defiant, and it's conduct disorder, which is for like serious stuff.
Mm.
Or we have kind of friction between practitioners where a practitioner will, a client may present anxious, but to them it seems angry. So now there's this weird relationship dynamic going on with the practitioner because again, they've pathologized the typical way that we present certain emotions. Another one I see a lot is honestly, I feel like with Black men, depression is underdiagnosed. I think that for whatever reasons, however we're taught, I came up in a social justice counseling program, founded by the first like Black person in Oklahoma. So I was kind of differently in my training, but a lot of people did not get that education, and so they're kind of clinging to these, I'll say, like textbook ways of looking at race and culture, and they're bringing that into their clients, into their interactions with their clients. So the more that we educate ourselves, book wise, reading some of the more contemporary authors, the more that we make sure that we're at conferences and places where we can socialize with therapists of color, we can kind of share this knowledge and make the field a lot safer, honestly.
So it's not that it's a lack of knowledge in all cases. Some of it is more of a matter of sharing knowledge in an environment where better ideas and concepts are going to grow. Would
Yeah.
that be accurate?
Definitely, definitely. I do a training. I have a two-pack. One is towards informed treatment of Black women, and the second step is crowned with trauma, healing Black women, where I really go into some of the multi-generational traumas, the PTSS, and how that's affected our families. And when I'm there, it's funny. Sometimes I have a room full of Black people, sometimes I have a room full of non-Black people, and it seems like everyone's learning because something that I've definitely realized coming back to California is that a lot of the education that I received in a town that was majority Black, people here didn't get. So there's a lot of Black history that was missed.
Hmm.
So as I'm working with some of those clients, instilling that in them is helping them to build their confidence in other areas.
Speaking of confidence, I want to make a transition here about, literally post-traumatic slave syndrome. We have had slavery, it is gone, we have overcome, we've sang the songs, we have video footage, and we still can't seem to all get along.
Mm.
One of the causes is just sort of a vacant esteem kind of concept that you had shared with me. And I can understand how that can happen, especially with some of our youth who are marginalized. What are some of the other items that come to mind under that same category that we're just not addressing explicitly enough?
So Dr. Joy Degree, I'm still working on her name, um, does kind of issue some I guess, ways of looking at what we call post-traumatic slave syndrome. So one of those are the vacant esteem. Another one is just kind of this anger that just stays there. Others include just lack of being able to heal or access some of the benefits of society. So you package all that up, you get this kind of just ever-present anger. And when the recent events happened in Memphis, I asked myself, okay, kind of why are we marching again? This is dealt with, it's been handled. And it hit me that, these are people, though we have now kind of come to light, we've seen that this is occurring, that police brutality is a real thing. Though we see that and can acknowledge that in some spaces now, that doesn't do anything for the healing of those people who actually experienced it. So it's nice to have your pain acknowledged, but all of the trauma that came about over the past 20 plus years of their lives through whether it be witnessed, second, third hand, whatever, that's not healed. And so when you see people still out there, still wanting to march, still wanting to come together, I really think that is one, they've been re-triggered, and they kind of need this healing space because it's not offered much, whether you unless you come to my office. So there aren't many places that are offering spaces to do some of that healing from racial trauma. Dr. Luke Wood is doing a study right now, I think, on community colleges and racial battle fatigue. Just the weight that we carry daily of having to have conversations that include race lighting, which is a concept he coined. Race lighting is much like gaslighting, is when someone tells you your experience is not real. And so we're carrying all of that. Our kids are carrying that. They don't even have the coping skills to process it. Adults have been carrying it for 20 plus years. And so now, again, I am having people come into therapy at 40 and 50, looking back on their lives and realizing all of the micro traumas and the complex trauma that they have endured. And they're just like, what do I do? Where do I start? So a lot of my work, honestly, is working with youth to build them up esteem wise, to make sure that they have a cultural identity that is not assaultive in the opposite direction, right? Because we don't want to create little hating children, hateful children. But infusing enough of it into therapy so that they can find an identity that works for them, find a shade or a style that works for them. I was a Black girl who was a skater, grew up in the suburbs. That wasn't exactly accepted in the area where I was, and so I think it's important that we let our kids know that anything you want to do, we're not going to say, "Oh, you're not that Black," or "You're not really Black." You can't. So in the home, we have to be better about that as well. So there are a lot of kind of themes that hinge upon vacant esteem. There are a lot of ways that it shows up in the classroom. I'm definitely available for consultation. If any educators or anyone that's interested in talking about that to support their students, I'm available for parents to figure out how to empower their kiddos to be proud of themselves and what they represent.
I think one of the things we have to be mindful of with that machismo that comes, and even from in the feminine side, is that
Mhm,
you're going to be susceptible to underdiagnosing. You're
mhm,
you're not getting clear facts. As someone who's worked quite a while with younger folks, not too long, but quite a while, how do you battle that when you're actually on the front line, when you're actually going through your practices of diagnosing? How do you avoid underdiagnosing, and why does
mhm.
that make you special?
So diagnosis is such a fun little area, right? So first off, anything I approach, whether it's a student, a school, a child, a person, we're gonna assess first. Something that I'm picking up here lately as I'm working with clients that they're getting assessed, but their therapist may not be explaining the results or the reasoning. So I don't know who's doing it, but I hope we return to our ethical principles and know that if you're working with someone and they asking you a bunch of questions, they should be letting you know what they're assessing and what the results were and what that means for your treatment and your life. So we don't want to just do a PHQ-9 and not really talk to someone. I have kids who are diagnosed with ADHD and they can't even explain what that means. So we start with assessment. That's going to help get clear facts. And most of our assessments are built to kind of weed out uh, some of the things that aren't true. So that's where it really starts. And you do your assessments, you use tools, you use surveys, use questionnaires, and you also ground it with your clinical interview. My assessment also includes a genogram, which looks at multi-generations of your family history and the different dynamics. Was there abuse in that family? Was there addiction? Who was the favorite kid? What number are you? What birth order was your mother? So I look at all of those things, and that paints a full picture of my client. We're usually done with that in the first two sessions. And honestly, a lot of my clients are like, I'm good. Like, you unlocked so much in that first couple of sessions. So we start there. That's important culturally because, again, culture can be pathologized. So when you're not from a particular person's culture, and this is the same for me if I'm working with a Latina client, that sometimes we have implicit bias. It's just a real thing. We have it. We didn't mean to have it, but we have to be open to really understanding our client on a personal level. So when I do that, I get just much better information. I'm really just I'm a very authentic therapist. And so I am blessed that a lot of my clients come authentically to me. I present an atmosphere where you don't have to be afraid, be shamed. There definitely are limits to confidentiality that any therapist will let you know. But I just create a space so that people can give clear facts so that we can get an accurate diagnosis and know where to go from there.
I think that's probably one of the things that really makes you outstanding is that sense of clarity and accuracy. And I think to experience that is even more important as some of our young African American king and queens are trying to grow into their individual selves. So
Mhm.
with that being said, how does our audience reach you, Tamika?
Me. I can be found on Facebook and Instagram. I am at the Advantage Counselor. I'm going to spell that ADVANTAGECOUNSELOR at the Advantage Counselor. My office line is 909-255-9135. You can find me there as well if you need help for your kiddo, your students, your teachers, your organization needs some mental wellness help. Call me up. I'm available.
Once again, I am Glenn W. Hunter. I am privileged to be sharing a split screen with Tamika J. Carter. And let me tell you, the Advantage Counselor is available and she's serving. And this is just one vehicle. So please subscribe, tune in, catch us next week with the fresh information, next 2 weeks into fresh information. But more importantly, make sure you are doing and practicing self-care. You are important, you matter. Tamika, thank you so much.